Hello, everybody. Welcome to ttrpg Designer Spotlight. This is our special program here where we uplift and showcase the work of game designers, especially game designers of marginalized identities. With that, I and this channel stand against genocide and ethnic cleansing and support all the oppressed peoples of the world struggling against injustice, imperialism, and colonization. Free Congo, free Sudan, and free Palestine. And with that, hello everybody, I'm Valiant Dorian, I use him, his pronouns. I'm a ttrpg performer, GM, writer, and Twitch variety streamer. You can find me all around the internet at Valiant Dorian or at Otso SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure hunt I just set you on. And tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing our amazing guests. They are a talented Malaysian writer and game designer crafting wonderful gaming experiences in their games. What should we have tomorrow? An altogether different river, and today's features Spectres of Brocken. Now, before I get ahead of myself, Aaron, please introduce yourself and where we can find you.
Yeah, I mean, you really did a really good job at that. So,
Glad I could help you.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Aaron. I am a game designer, game maker, and game educator now, I guess. And
We're going to
yeah,
I
I make games. Most of my stuff. I think pretty much all my stuff is on itch.io. So it's you can find that at aaronlime.itch.io, spelled EHRONLIME. Yeah, that's me, I guess. That's where you can find my stuff. I'm also on social media as, like, if you search Aaron Lime, like I use that handle pretty much everywhere. Yeah, that's me basically. I'll take this opportunity really quickly to also mention a thing that I am heavily involved in, which is the Playtest Zero sessions, which we run playtest meetups every other week, every other Tuesday, and every other Tuesday for the Southeast Asia friendly sessions, and every other Thursday for the US friendly sessions, for the US friendly time zone sessions. They run at different times because it helps people at different time zones. And we are going to be doing a event to showcase all the stuff that we've been playtesting, and like making for 2023. That will happen in January 2024. So that's, just look out for that. That's called Showcase Zero. We did Showcase Zero for 2022 earlier this year already. And we're going to do it again. So yeah.
That is amazing. Yes, Aaron is an incredible paragon of like playtesting. We will also be getting into that. To me, at least. To me, at the very least. And before we get right into the interviewing proper, we're going to be doing a feature specifically of Aaron's game Spectres of Brocken. It is a role-playing game about making friends and then years later going to war against them in giant mechs. It's a game about finding out who you are and what you have become. So for more information on this game, please use !Spectres to get a link to its itch.io page. Please go and check it out. It's a really, really cool game, and we're going to talk all about it. And if you're enjoying Designer Spotlight, everybody, you might have noticed this lovely tipping goal that's right above us. Consider donating and leaving us a tip. The funds raised will be distributed evenly between our tech producer and our guest designer. So use !donate in chat to support us. So that I'm just going to pop that command in chat. Please consider donating and helping us out. Amazing. With all of that, Aaron, let us get right into it then, into this episode of Designer Spotlight. So first off, I want to talk about TTRPGs and you. And I'm always so curious about how folks get into TTRPGs. So how'd you get into the hobby?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky because, like, I've been asked this question before, and I'm trying to remember exactly how I first started hearing about it, and I don't remember. That's the thing. I do remember how I tried to start playing tabletop RPGs. That was around D&D 3rd edition, when 3rd edition was just coming out.
I see.
And obviously in Malaysia it's like fucking expensive. Sorry, I'm swearing.
You can swear. You're fine. We're a swearing friendly channel. Do not worry about it.
Yeah. so it's really fucking expensive to like buy
That times
international books
5
here.
conversion
Yeah,
rate is ouchie.
yeah. So my earliest memories of trying to play D&D was statute of limitations is off. It's like pirating the PDF and like
Yeah,
like going to a print shop and like printing it out,
That's
which is
really
not cheap
clever.
either.
That's really clever.
Only because like my mom is friends with like the auntie who runs the print shop, right? It's like, so I got to do it for cheap. And I tried to get like a friend to like play it with, and then we couldn't figure it out. Like there was no, back then there was no actual plays, there's no like stuff, so everything was just like trying to learn through reading.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know anyone else who played here. I'm sure there were, right? But like that was early days of the internet, and like very worried that like if the moment you chat to someone you don't know on the internet, they will just reach out through the screen and grab you, and then you're gone, you're just in the internet now. So yeah, like I that was the earliest memory of like trying to learn how to play tabletop RPGs. Was like printing the 3rd edition handbook in like black and white. I think I still have that somewhere at my mom's house.
Still have
Probably.
that is incredible.
Probably.
Actually. That is amazing.
yeah. So that didn't take off. Obviously, like we read it and like didn't even make it past. But like it was really cool to look at the book, right? And then I didn't really get it. I didn't start playing tabletop RPGs until 4th edition. So for me, 4th edition is like I still treat that as like my first encounter with tabletop RPGs. And the main reason why I started 4th edition wasn't really because of D&D. It was because they actually had like they started doing audio podcasts, like actual plays around that time. So I started learning. I learned how to play 4th edition by listening to Wizards of the Coast put out I think the Acquisitions Incorporated podcast with the Penny Arcade folks.
I see.
I think that coincided with the release of 4th edition, just to like get people to learn the rule set. Chris Perkins was DMing, and like it was basically just like a promo thing to like teach people the new rules, right?
Yeah.
And then listening to Critical Hit, which was a 4th edition podcast as well. So that really informed, or like that kind of like unlocked things for me, right? Oh, okay, this is how you actually play it, right? Rather than just reading the rule book. So I was already interested in like indie, like other, I think Fate was like pretty big around that time as well, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. I think Fate was like 2009, 2010 maybe.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so gotcha. I was trying to like learn other RPGs as well, but like none of I mean I probably could have like searched harder and found, but like it was really easy to find. I think it was a big thing at the time. Like Penny Arcade was big. So them doing that. I think if I remember correctly, the Wizards also did the same thing with like Robot Chicken. People as well, like they were just trying things, right? like putting together how to play, like to them, like it wasn't really like an actual play like we think of it now. It's more like a promo of like, oh, okay, here's how to play the game, right? And I didn't really get into playing. So I got really familiar with like 4th edition, and then only after that, like after play, like finding friends to play with, and then we played for a while, and then I played with that group of friends, and then we ventured out. We started playing other systems as well. Yeah, I think we played like Fate and what was the other early ones that we played? It wasn't Cyberpunk. It was something. Anyways, but yeah, like that. So that was. So I probably started playing 4th edition around 2010, end of 2009, early 2010. I I remember it's definitely 20. I definitely played a lot of fourth ed during 2010 because that's when I was job hunting, which meant I had a lot of free time. All of us were job hunting and had a lot of free time because of the global financial crisis a couple of years before,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I remember that time fondly, right? Like we played a lot of games, like while we were all job hunting.
Oh my god, that is so cute. That's like it is also really fascinating to me, and folks in chat have already like picked up on this as well. Like, it's so fascinating that 4E was like a touchstone for you, because we don't get to hear a lot of 4E in like the current zeitgeist, and I think a lot of people when they talk about D&D and the first time they touched an RPG, it's usually 5E. Right, so it's very, very interesting to hear that. And also for me, as someone who lives here, who lives in Malaysia, understands Malaysia, like in 2009, I was 12 years old. I was in primary school, and I was really, really young, and I never got to hear about RPGs till I went overseas. And I remember like talking to my brother about this, and because we both got into D&D around the same time, during the pandemic. And for both of us, we were like, damn, if only we knew about this. If we like knew about this, this would have been our shit growing up. Like, we would have been those TTRPG kids. But we didn't, because again, like you mentioned earlier, like there was, in being in Malaysia, it was hard, pretty difficult, pretty inaccessible to access TTRPGs. I mean, you went to a printer auntie and printed out 3rd edition. That's so funny to me. It's so deeply Malaysian. It was so deeply Malaysian to do that. I find that so funny.
I'll tell you what. So I probably got to know about D&D because so from a very young age, like I wanted to make games, right? So I think I was a game designer first before I was a tabletop RPG player, right? So I wanted to make games. I think it was very, very influenced by like playing the Pokemon trading card game as a kid. And I was like, fuck, I can make cards, right? I can make card games. So this is just like a me personality thing where like when I get into something, I like really get into it. And like, so when I was trying to like learn how to like make like card games, like trading card games and stuff like that, right?
Shout out to the Pokemon TCG.
Yeah, hi,
that I have
hello.
right here.
I basically tried to learn as many trading card games, board games as possible, right? And to do that, the wonders of the early internet, like I just went on all people's websites and like downloaded the PDFs. It's not even PDFs. Like back then, it would have been like text files.
The text files, yeah. I was like,
of like all the different games. I mean, there probably were PDFs already at that time. It's just like I don't remember. Like I do remember I printed out the card list for like Magic the Gathering in like text format to read, right? Like because I had limited time on like the PC, so I was like, okay, I'll just like save like a text file that has like all the cards, and so I had like printed stacks of like like Magic the Gathering card lists in text. Yeah, and like probably through all of that research, because that's also how I started from like trading card games, and then like that's how I learned about like other board games and card games as well. I wasn't really able to like get into them until later on, because again, in being in Malaysia, it's really, really difficult back then to like get like Euro games, like all this kind of like more modern board games, aside from like the usual, Monopoly, Jenga, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like similar to you. You mentioned you didn't really encounter it until you went overseas.
Yeah.
So I had been like really interested in all this, like and like I learned how to play like the BattleTech card game. I never found anywhere that like sold like the BattleTech card game, right? They probably did, but like it was expensive, and it's like I'm really spending money on like Pokemon, right? I'm not gonna spend money on it on other stuff, and yeah, like that's just how it is, right? Like so a lot of my like early game design like ideas were filtered through not actually playing the games, but just my ideas of how those games were played or how those games should it be played.
Amazing.
Which were wrong. Like right, like like for example, like like so this is the thing that
self-reprimand immediately.
this is the thing about me, right? I learned how to play Magic the Gathering from the comprehensive rules, which is a very, very stupid way to learn how to play Magic the Gathering.
I have no horse in this race. Never played a Magic the Gathering.
Right. So I had no understanding that like vigilance, which is like, attacking doesn't cause a creature to tap. I had no understanding that was a defensive ability. I thought that was an offensive ability. And it kind of is. It lets you be offensive while being defensive. Right. So like my preconceptions of like how the mechanics interacted with each other, the dynamics in the games was like completely wrong.
No, but it's so interesting that you said that you are a game designer first before really a TTRPG player. But I do want to touch on like you've been at the TTRPG game for a while now. You started with 3rd edition, right? And then you start playing 4th edition. So I wanted to ask, what captured you about TTRPGs? What was it about TTRPGs that has retained your attention so strongly all these years?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like the free form notion of it. Even though like 4th edition has a reputation as like being the video gamey one, right? Which I think is a strength rather than a weakness, because it opened itself up to like new players, right? So when I started playing, and like or more like, so I was really interested in playing, but the pathway for me to get other people interested in playing it with me is that I had a regular board game group at the time, and then we played the Castle Ravenloft board game that is based on like very simplified 4th edition rules. And then I like got them and said, oh, okay, that's really fun. Hey, do you want to do this where like you have a lot more customization options and you have a lot more freedom to like do stuff rather than just what's in this board game? Cool. There's a whole other game that we can do that with. And so that was a really useful way to like get people who might not have played tabletop RPGs to try it out. So that kind of like kept my interest, and like a part of it is just seeing like how I think that the thing that really sparked my continued interest is like when we shifted away from like 4th edition to playing like more indie tabletop games, and like saying, oh wow, there's like so many things that you can do within the medium, right? We played Microscope really early, and like that was like a huge like light turn on moment as well. It's like, oh okay, yeah, you don't need a GM, you don't need like these like you don't need to play a character, you don't need to have those kind of like it doesn't have to be just that one paradigm of like how a game is, right?
Absolutely.
So like understanding tabletop RPGs as like a medium rather than a genre was the thing that like kept me going at it.
I really love that. Medium, not a genre. That really resonates. I really love that. And now I get to ask you, like, yeah, you were game designer first before TTRPG, before getting into TTRPGs, right?
Yeah.
How'd you? So it's through Pokemon, but like, what made you take the plunge to go like, yeah, I'm gonna make a tabletop game. Like, I'm just gonna do it.
I don't know, youthful exuberance and hubris, I guess.
Not hubris.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. I played it and I was like, I mean.
Was there a game that inspired it? Like, was there like a little like a particular game that you wanted to play, and what like kind of like spurred you on to make it when you first started?
I don't know. Like it was definitely like I even before like playing like the Pokemon trading card game, we played a lot of board games in our house anyways, right? And I remember very distinctly one of the things, I don't know whether that was before I started playing Pokemon or like after we had like marathon like Risk sessions, right? Like we'd play Risk for like 6 hours or something.
So that's
and I remember yeah, like playing with friends until like 2 a.m. in the morning, and like um yeah, I've loved like board games and card games for a long time, and I think the Pokemon trading card game was when like it kind of clicked to me that like, oh, you can just like write down stuff and make up shit, because like they're individual cards, right? Like individual
Yes.
cards are like components in the whole game, so you don't need to design the whole game, you just need to design a new card, right?
Oh yeah. Damn, you're. I was just like,
So
that's true. Yeah, you could just
so
design
like
individual cards.
you start like making like custom
Yeah.
cards and stuff like that, and like, oh, like and I think one of the early things, like now that I talk about it, like is also like we played like the risk variants, right? And they were in the rule book already. It's like, look, if you don't like how risk like takes like fucking forever to play, you can play with the secret missions,
Yeah.
or you can play different variants, and say, oh, okay, you can actually change stuff in the game if you don't like it, right? So those two things combined together, I think, were probably the earliest earliest things that like spurred me to like want to like design games of my own, right? Yeah, I think it just kind of went from there. Like Magic the Gathering, after that, like after learning it from the comprehensive rules, I finally found other people who played it, and then getting into Magic was like a huge thing as well, because it kind of like graduated from like, okay, you can design individual cards, and then in Magic there's like different formats. People play like, you know, limited and constructed and like Highlander or Commander nowadays, and like you can just also like adjust the format of like how, like, so the base rule set is the same, but you change a medium rule set, right? Of like, you know, changing the deck building rules, or like changing the I think early on there was already stuff like choosing like a Vanguard or like a Commander, right? Like those old big Vanguard cards, like you can make a lot of like different adjustments to the game without changing that underlying system.
I see.
And that was like all that was like really influential for me early on.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Like with Valis, it was interesting to hear about like Valis' experience with like specifically video game design leading into this, and it was very interesting to hear your like board game and card game design background influencing kind of like your path in game design. And as I've read Spectres of Brocken, I can also see how that influence kind of also influences how you design games as well. Because when I looked at Spectres, I thought, wow, this is a very like board gamey RPG, and I don't know if I've experienced a lot of games that felt that way. The most recent one was when I was reviewing Marvelous Children of Inanguri by Mamatos, where I was like, wow, this is a very board gamey RPG, and I haven't experienced a lot of those. We'll get more into that, but I just hearing this origin story made me go, huh, I see the through line, I see the red thread of fate that has come in your design journey here. When you first started game design, did you find it really daunting? You said, "Oh, I was filled with youthful exuberance and, and hubris." Did you find getting into it daunting?
It's hard to like try and think back to like what young me was thinking, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about daunting, but like I did feel like a lack of not resources, but like it's very different trying to make games nowadays than back then. Like, and I wouldn't even say that like I felt a lack of like resources, because I just wasn't aware of that there were other resources, right?
Just didn't know how to get them.
Yeah. It's just like, okay, fine. This is what's available to me. It like seems plenty already, and then I'll use these, right? So like to me, like I think the main thing was just like always not realizing like what I wanted to do with it after. Like I knew I wanted to like design games, and I think this does help kind of like influence my current like philosophy on like game making, which is like you can just make games for like making games, right? You don't have to like make games to be commercial products or like to sell them. Just because like back then I just didn't have the thought of the avenue of like selling games, right? So I just made games because I wanted to make games. there was no like pathway for me to like, oh, eventually I want to publish these games. It's like, no, I just made the games to play them. And like with that, and I didn't even like, it wasn't even like when I was young, I was like, oh yeah, I want to become a game designer, right? Like I want to go and like study game design and like go and make games elsewhere. That just wasn't a thing to me. It was just like, no, I'm already making games. I'm having fun doing that. So I didn't need to like professionalize it. Until recently, right? So that kind of like that early experience with that has like kind of stayed with me and like how I think about like making games, because like, oh yeah, like I used to make games just to make games, right? And I still try to keep doing that, and like be kind of aware of like, you know, you can make games to make games.
Yeah, I want to get a little deeper into that, because I remember I saw your tweet about making games for like as making a marketable product versus making games for making games. I would love to hear your perspective on what that means to you. What does that mean to make games for the sake of making games? How does that resonate for you?
Yeah, so this thinking is also like very recently heavily influenced by like being in touch with like the indie video game scene in Melbourne, where I ended up moving to Melbourne, Australia for uni, right? So I did my I studied in University of Melbourne, and then I stayed on and like I lived in, so I ended up living in Melbourne for like close to 15 years. And in that time, you know, like nerd circles, right? Like I ended up joining a lot of like board game groups and like getting to know other people who play games, right? And like through that, I met a bunch of people who were in the video games, like the local, the Melbourne like indie video games industry, and I attended like a lot of like Free Play, which is a independent video games festival, and got to learn a lot about like making video games. But the good thing, the great thing about Free Play is that it's not about making video games, right? It's about making games. It is an independent games festival. And so they were very open to like tabletop games and all other sorts of like games, pervasive games, installation games, even theater, immersive theater and stuff like that. So they had a very wide remit, and a very wide view of like what the field of games was, and that influenced my thinking a lot. And the people who were talking about and writing about like indie video games, like Brendan Keogh, Dan Golding, like a lot of like people who were thinking about games and writing. I think Brendan Keogh was probably the one who kind of like turned that switch on. Like he mentioned like, oh, we look at games not just as like commodity production, but also as like cultural production, right?
Okay.
And like if you like I think the start of the argument, like look, if you want to treat games as an art form, right? Like back then, you know, in like the mid 2010s, early 2010s, like everyone was like arguing, are games art? And right, look, if you want games to be art, then you have to like also open the idea of thinking of games as folk art, as games as like art that can be made not for like commercial purposes, right? That like game, like if the field of like painting and like drawing can include you know, high art that goes into like galleries, and pop art that is like, you know, producing posters and like magazines and stuff like that, then the field of drawing also includes people like children drawing like in kindergarten and like posting up their drawings onto your fridge.
Creativity,
right?
for creativity's sake.
And I think the argument that he made was like, yeah, you should have games that are that too, like games that are the equivalent of a drawing in crayon, made on a piece of paper stuck up on a fridge, right? Like games should be that as well. And so that like really influenced my thinking on like what games are as well. And like, and then thinking back to like for myself, like because I was already like it's just reinforcing stuff that I wouldn't say reinforced, but like it reminded me, right? Like, oh yeah, like make games because I enjoy making them, right? Like the act of like game making is an enjoyable process. Like the act of
Yes.
design by itself, like meeting people and like talking design with other people, making games. Like even if we have like commercial aspirations at the end of it, but like the and this kind of ties into playtesting a little bit, right? Like every game that we playtest, every game. So I before doing playtest zero, back in Melbourne, I used to run help run incubator. So I didn't start. This is like a common thread with me, right? Like I don't start off these events. Like someone else like helps start them, but then I end up being the one like keeping it running.
I see.
Just because I have free time, right?
Yeah.
And we ran incubator like monthly, and like that's mainly like focused on like board game playtesting, right? And all the games that I playtested there, at various stages, like they're games, right? We played games at those playtesting events, right? I wouldn't say that they are incomplete games. They are games. We played them, right? They might not have been super fun, and they could have been improved, and they were like, right? Like people came back and like improved their games and like made changes to them, but they were fun games. And like there are some versions of games that will never see the light of day that I actually prefer to like the final produced version, right? Because some people that were in incubator ended up like producing their games through Kickstarter or like publishing or whatever it is, and it's like I kind of prefer one iteration earlier in your development cycle, but I understand that like you were making the game for that audience, and so that version of the game that I like will never be published, right? But that doesn't mean that game didn't exist. That we played that game. I love that game, right? And so like to me, like the act of like making and playing is like more important, like the act of like quote unquote finishing a game, because it's not that like you finish games, right? Like people say like you abandon them, right? Or you just stop developing them, right? Like if you come back, look at like how many games have like second editions in like the last 3 years.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right.
It's just like, okay, you stop developing it and like you had to like put something out, and then you come back and like you keep working on it, you keep designing it, right? Like that game is alive and vital, in a way that like a lot of other art forms, not to say that they are not alive and vital, but like there's a willingness to like come back to games, and reinvent them, and because they are reinvented every time, right? Like at the table, every time you play a game, it is not the exact same game. But I mean, you can make the argument for like any screening of a movie, or every time you read a book as well, right? So I don't think I guess it's like it's not a unique thing to games. So it's not unique to games, but it is something that I started paying attention to, right?
No, that makes so much sense. I do want to tie this into playtesting because as someone who's now a game designer who is currently making a game that I'm really, really passionate about, it takes up all of my waking thought. I carry one of your one of the things you said to me as like a little mantra in my head every time I sit down and I write this goddamn game, or if I'm about to send an email to a bunch of people to play test my game. I quite literally say this phrase that you've always told me, which is no draft is too rough to play test.
I should credit Aricia Santiago for that. She came up with that.
Amazing.
Check out their games too. Core and In Calamity's Wake. Just check out their stuff. She's doing really cool stuff.
That's amazing. I love their seeing that, because that gets me through a lot of kind of the self-editing loop that happens when you're like writing a thing where you feel like you need to edit it while you're doing it, and when you're prepping things out to be play tested. And what you said just now actually really was so interesting, is that there is going to be an iteration of a game while it's going through playtesting that doesn't see the light of day, which I think is very, very interesting, of like the trend. You said that, when a game is not the same when you come back to it, might not be necessarily unique, because you might feel that with movies or with books. But in a playtesting sense, that might be genuinely the case, because you might not
Mhm.
see an iteration of the game. The game is going to be constantly transforming, and I think what's unique about TTRPG specifically is that your game's going to go to a bunch of other tables, and all those tables are going to probably run it just a little differently than how
Yeah,
you've written
yeah.
it. And I wanted to get your opinion about like this idea of like playtesting and consistent transformation and change. Like,
Mhm.
because again, I've mentioned your face is the face that comes up when I think about playtesting.
Okay.
Like,
um yeah, so like a couple of things,
yeah.
right? Um like part of it is like something that I've come to like really think about is like playtesting is play, right?
Mhm.
Um um so making sure that we engage with it as play and like playfully as well. Otherwise you risk burning out on like if you're focused on the end product rather than the current
Mm.
process, right?
Mhm.
That's one thing I like to try and think about and like help other people remember as well, because it can be disheartening to like
Mm.
play test your game and it's like, oh man, it's not living up to my expectations.
Mhm.
And that's like thinking about like the end product, right?
Yeah.
Like you have an idea of what the game should do and you want it to do, and it's not there yet. And it's important to have those goals, right?
Mhm.
Like this is something I tell my students all the time. It's like have a goal, like figure out what you want your game to do, and like work on that. So I'm not trying to diminish the importance, but like to keep the like to keep the game designer fed as well,
Mhm.
right? So to understand like you are putting something together currently that is being played and enjoy the play of it and like enjoy the
Mm.
playfulness of playtesting of like designing, right? Designing is all design. I think of design as like also a playful process,
Yeah.
right? um or like I would like to keep it as a playful process rather than like a slog, right?
Yes.
That gives you the motivation to like continue playing and playtesting, right?
Mhm.
And so to see each playtest not as like an obligation or like um a trial that you have to
Mhm.
go through, but like as something joyful to engage with and like discover like what your game is doing, like
Yes.
what other people think about the game.
Mhm.
Not even your game, what other people think about games, right?
Yes.
And like to be very like like game design can be like a lonely process sometimes if you do it
Mm.
yourself, like the doy. um so it is
Last
really good to like
last
get
in designing, writing, everything by
yeah
myself.
yeah, it's really good to like get out of your head and like put it in front of other people and like see like to remember that like like if you make games, you ultimately are trying to communicate with people, right?
Mm.
And to communicate better with people, you should try and understand people.
Yes.
And playtesting is like part of playtesting is also understanding players, understanding people,
Mm.
um, rather than just understanding your game, right? Like if your game is not improving, but your understanding of people is improving, you are still getting better as a game designer, and
That's
that
true.
helps your game,
That's
right?
true.
So that's a thing that I try to like keep in mind in like playtesting is like to be to keep the game designer
Yeah.
like not protected, but like to keep the well-being. That's the word I'm
well-being,
looking for.
yeah.
The well-being of the
Preserving
game
your
designer and the
well-being.
people playing it also like to conserve that, right? To conserve that energy and like spark
Mhm.
for why you are making this game in the first place. So I think that's really important to think about. In terms of like rigor, right? Design rigor
Yes.
of like, oh, like a game needs to like have a lot of playtesting. It's like yes and no, in that like I think some game. So I personally think that you should just playtest your game because it's fun. Not because like, oh, you make a bad game if you don't playtest it. No, playtest the game because it's like fucking fun to playtest a game,
Okay.
right? And like to me, like I keep saying, like the design process is fun. Why wouldn't you do it, right? Why wouldn't you playtest the game? Because it's fun to do. Like my agenda here is that like playtesting is fun, not that playtesting is required. So it's like you should playtest your game. because it's fun to do.
What a helpful reframe. What a wonderful, wonderful reframe.
Well, because if you don't have, I think like if you don't have that thinking right, then you will start treating playtesting as like a slog, right? And
Yeah.
then that robs the spark of like design.
Mm.
So yeah, so in terms of like, you know, like also it kind of comes back to like how you connect with people, right?
Mm.
Like if you care about connecting with people, then you will care about making a game that does connect with people,
Yes.
right? And sometimes that means not playtesting the game, quote unquote, right? Because like for example, like even reading a game is like kind of a playtest, right? To see whether you know the ideas are getting across. And like we talk about like game design and like game writing is like very different.
Yes.
Like, so I use the term very different, non-exclusively, right? So if they're different, but they can also be the same, right? The two things can be true.
Yes.
So game design and game writing are like similar overlapping disciplines, but they're not fully the same.
Okay.
So in a similar way, there are different ways to playtest a game. Like putting your game in front of someone, let them read it, and like give you feedback, or like just look like, you know, did they give you a hell yeah or not? It's also kind of playtesting,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes like you can make quote unquote unplayable games, right? Like in the traditional form of like play, like we can look at like the lyric games movement, where like there's a lot more about games that are designed with the reading and the imagining of play more in focus than the quote unquote table play, right? And so that kind of like the playtesting of the game lies in the imagination and in the reading, right?
Yes.
So like, not to say that you can't do it ever, but like it's not the important part of it, right? So like making sure that like even designing unplayable games is a form of like engaging in games, right? Like one of my most the most impactful thing that I've seen in a game that like is no longer available. I can't even remember. I don't have it off the top of my head, because like I'm afraid I might confuse a few designers that could have conceivably done it. But it's like, look, there's a game that you can pay like $200 for.
Okay.
I think it's called This Is Not a Game, right? And then you open up the PDF. So I didn't pay $200 for it. There was a time when like the author put it on sale for like $20, because like, look, I actually do need the money. I'm not, you know, this was made as like an artistic statement, but like I kind of need some money, so like so you can get it for $20. And then I looked at it and it's like, oh, the game was like, this is not a game, this is my life, right? And like the whole PDF was just like poetry and writing about like what they thought the way that they engage with the world, right? But the framing of it as a game, the framing of it as not a game, the framing of it as something that you pay money for on itch at a time when a lot of people were professionalizing and like selling stuff on itch. It's engaging with all of those things at the same time. And you can't say that it's not a game that is not being playful, right? And yet it is. The way to play it is to read it and to understand what it is engaging with, and all of the things that it is trying to like say about games and play.
That is so the framing that you've done on like playtesting once again has changed my brain chemistry of like, yeah, why wouldn't playtesting be fun? Because I remembered going into my first playtesting session with a few of my friends in a different Discord server. It's one of my friends who's a streamer has their own Discord server, and we all kind of like hang out. And so I organized a playtest between all of them, and they were all furries. So I thought, you know what, you'll love a furry werebeast game. This is target audience. And I remember in the half an hour leading up to the call, I was like fiddling around with all of my PDFs, and I was like just staring at my piece of work already, like basically like tearing it into pieces, trying to see like what the weaknesses are, almost like preemptively. right? And in this heated stress leading up into this playtest. And then I just sat down and I let them do their car gen. I watched like their feedback and how they did that. I was in game designer and playtest mode. And then came the combat playtesting where I got to like run a combat scenario for them. And then in the role shift of just becoming a GM, I was like, oh, this is really fun. I just like playing this game, and it seems that everyone in this call with me is enjoying playing the game. This is very nice. And I think when you said like, oh, this is a form of play, you should play test because it's fun. Made me just go, yeah, why wouldn't it be fun? It is fun. A lot of it kind of just, like you said, is in the framing, and you kind of just in as a game designer, in trying to create something that is an end goal, you kind of just get sucked into this kind of unhelpful mental loop. That really resonates with me. That it's really really cool.
Yeah, and like I do want to mention that like that doesn't mean like that playtesting is not nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah,
it is like putting your work in front of people is like difficult.
Yes.
And it's not that playtesting isn't a difficult thing. It is not that playtesting is not a skill, right? But like I think a lot of people are already talking about like, hey, how can you get better at playtesting? Here are all the tools. Here are all the things that like the mentality around like how to think about playtesting, I think is like something that I want to talk about more because there's so many like stuff that's talking about like here's how you ask questions, here's how to collect feedback, and that's all really important and really good. But like how do you like protect your love for the game is also really important, I think.
Yeah, that also deeply resonated with me because that's so one of the programs we run here on this channel is ttrpg learning spaces. This is where I will be taking usually indie games. I read through the rule book, show folks how to run and read it, and sometimes we talk about game design. And when I talk about like my updates to the Beast Within and letting folks know how things are going, folks tell me about the games. And I hear a lot of feedback from folks who are budding game designers. They've got so many creative ideas, and they kind of just, there's a lot of things about game design that's daunting and like playtesting that's daunting. And this idea of like preserving your love for the game, because again, going through any sort of creative process can burn you out, like especially if you're trying to like earn money from it, or if you're trying to produce it for a particular critical acclaim, whatever your reasons are, it can burn you out. And this idea, this reframe of also valuing the well-being of the game designer is, I'm kind of almost surprised we don't talk about it enough actually in the game design space. There's a kind of I know that no one in the game design space is like putting necessarily that pressure, but I think there's that tension of like the validity of your creativity within your production, whether it's for money or for any other purpose. It's like your consistency and your ability to produce and put things of a particular quality is symbol of your capability and prowess. And I wonder how you feel about that, about kind of like balancing this kind of like ever-shifting tension between making something and taking care of yourself at the same time.
I think it's not right to say that like it's not talked about, but like I feel like a lot of the way we talk about it is in more general terms of like taking care of your mental health and like taking breaks and stuff like that, right? I think one of the things is that like the way I approach it, like it's like, oh, this like artsy fartsy thing of like looking at games as like cultural production and like but like I find that very helpful. Like a lot of people like might think that like, oh, you're complicating things, like just make the game to be fun. But like I find that it's very helpful to interrogate how you think about games, because it informs how you engage with them, and that helps like helps you kind of like engage with the process of like enjoying the process, right? So that's to start with. Like to me, like reading game theory like makes me love games more, like I think people should do it, but also I might just be weird about it. Fully understanding that like not. I mean, this is a thing about like playtesting and like making games. Also, is that like getting to understand that like not everyone is like you. That's the reason we playtest, right? Is the
Yeah.
reason what the beautiful reason why we playtest is that every person in this world is unique,
Yes.
right? And trying to form common ground between yourself and other people is one of the goals of like playtesting and design, right? And that is a pretty like beautiful connective thing. So in terms of like professionalism and like capability and stuff like that, I think not to say that like there's no skill in it, but like it's more like I said, right? Like everyone is already talking about it. I don't really have anything to add to that conversation. Like I like, so here's a thing of like how I think about like game skills, like game design skill or whatever, right? Like maybe I'm just like I fully expect that like, oh, maybe I'm just like weird about this and like I'm just like delusional and like hubristic. But like so to me, right, like I never I think of myself as like a very mid game designer.
Okay.
Right. But the way I think about that is like I think that like basically I should be the average game designer, like that, like, and that's a form of like arrogance as well, right? Like I'm the like every game designer should be able to like at least make games the way I do. Like that's the bare minimum I expect of them.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, my skill level should be like the base skill level,
I see
right?
how you're framing it, but I'm willing to see. Yeah, yeah. I'm willing to see the through line.
Part of that comes from like just experience of like I've been playtesting a bunch, and like I it's not like I have a lot of things to show for it, right? Like I haven't like published a lot of games, but like I have maybe unfounded confidence in myself that like my game design skills are average, right? And I think that's enough. I think you just need to be confident enough that your skills are average, that you can just put shit out, right? Because right, like you want to be the best game designer in the world? Fucking a lot of work, man. So be average. Just be average. It's fine. It's good to be average, right? And there's like less pressure on you. So my thinking and the way I think about professionalism is like I want to be average, right?
That is so awesome. That is so. I don't think you understand.
Don't tell my students this, because like I tell them, oh, try and be like good, right?
Yeah.
But like in my mind, it's like no. It's good to be average, and like just do stuff, and trust that like it's fine. It's a 7 out of 10. It's good. That's good enough.
That's such a wonderful like framing of like embracing.
2 years from now, when you have gotten better, right, then your average changes. Like your
Yeah. No, because like that's a very, very cool framing of like, yeah, being hearing you go from like, yeah, I think I'm very mid to being like, but maybe my hubris is thinking I'm average is such an incredible statement, but also like striving to be like, oh, good enough, kind of mental. It's it's a mindset I really resonate with.
To answer your question, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not to say that I don't want to get better.
Yeah.
Right? I do want to get better, right? But I also don't want to beat myself up if I don't get better.
Yes.
Because on the whole timeline of it, it's like I can get better on my own terms, right?
Yes.
And that comes from a place of privilege, right? Like I'm not like full-time working in the industry. I don't have any boss except myself, right? And that is the privilege of like being independent, right? I don't tie, like I don't need to like sell myself to like like a company, please hire me because I'm a good game designer. It's like,
Mm.
no, if I tell them, please hire me, I'm very average. Like, fucking, they're not gonna hire me. That's a very bad way about thinking about things. This is why I
Yeah.
don't tell my students that. But to survive and like to live as a designer, to like continue designing, it's like, look, it's okay. Sometimes you're mid.
Sometimes
So?
you're mid. And that's
Sometimes you're
okay.
mid.
Sometimes,
It's fine.
That's okay. No, this resonates with me because one of the things folks say about like writing in general, when you're like writing anything, is one of the like common mantras is like, don't let perfect get in the way of good.
Yeah.
And that's something that I try to keep with me. And like anytime I write, anytime I do anything, it's like, hey, good to strive, good to like want to be the best and all that, and good to be ambitious, but do not get into that like negative feedback loop where you're like, God, I suck because I'm not perfect, or I suck because I'm not good, right? And being able to kind of like embrace the process and embrace growth and embrace being mid. I love that. Like, embrace being mid. Wonderful.
Yeah, I think part of it is just like, look, like professionalism and becoming like better game designer is so it's such a weird target to have.
Yes.
Right. Like, I think like there's so many different ways to make games. There's so many different ways to make good games. Right. So trying to have that as like a goal, it's not to say that it's bad, but like it can be heartbreaking.
Yes.
Right. If you want something and you realize that you don't have the drive or the capability to get there. Right. And part of that is also just like making peace with like where we are at in Malaysia, for example. Right.
Yes.
Not to say that I think we have a lot of like world-class like game designers and like creatives here, but like we the opportunities available to us locally are like limited. Right. And the people who can break out of that like either have to work really hard or like they have other advantages that they can play. And so that kind of thinking is kind of like influenced a lot by that, of like being like, like it's really difficult to like get into like the halls of professionalism from where we are anyways. So
That's true.
Find the victories where you can, and like even if it means quote unquote being mid, right, or being average, right, like then it's about like finding where you are good at and being good there, right? Even if it means being good at being mid.
Yes. No.
In a weird way.
I don't know. It's so weird. I'm hearing this. And I'm embracing this. This is gonna be like embracing the hubris of being mid is such an incredible vibe. And I think you're saying something really, really important there, for sure. You are. Listen, you have no idea how many messages I get from folks who are like getting into game design, and that's the kind of like loop that they're stuck in. So like lots of folks who hear this are going to hear this and feel empowered is what I'm trying to highlight here. All of that aside, I've noticed that we're about an hour and 3 minutes in. Again, this is what always happens. I get into a conversation with someone in Designer Spotlight, and we just keep going, and it's really, really fun. But before we get to Spectres, I do want to ask you, as a game designer, you've made quite a few games now. I want to ask you, what do you think is core to an Aaron trademark game? Like, what is Aaron TM? What are the themes? What are the elements that make a game that feels like you?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about this, and like the best answer I can give is that I make the games that I would make. It's a shitty answer, because like basically saying like I don't really know what I want. What I want will change tomorrow. Like I think that's for other people to decide, right? Like what they think is like quote unquote Aaron core. I mean like it's stuff that I'm interested in. I like mechs. That's one thing. Like I'm a parody of myself. Like I started designing another game, and then like someone pointed out like, hey, it would make a lot more sense for this game to be about mechs. It's like, yeah, I know, but like I didn't want to make another mech game, so but like I went back and like made it a mech game anyways. So it's I'm back on the mech track.
Listen,
Uh,
I'm here to affirm you as someone who consistently makes like anthropomorphic animal slash furry content. Like you just
yeah.
every time I do a thing and I'm like, and it's furries again, and you know what? That's just how it is now. I like embracing the brand, right? Also loving mechs is so cool. Like I am always so normal about mechs. So normal about
Yeah, we can talk about that more later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard for me like being in it to like say what yeah, but like in terms of like what I try to do with my design is to I like embracing what the medium can do, but I also like embracing what the design can do, like what
Okay.
that specific game can do. So like as much as possible, I try to make games that like could only be done with those games.
I see.
This is why like it's not that I don't make like quote unquote generic RPG systems, right? Like something like GURPS or like being a SRD that can be adapted to like multiple games, right? It's not that I don't want to make them or like I'm not interested in them. I guess I'm not interested in them. I'm less interested in them. I'm more interested in like stuff that like, oh, I want to make that bespoke thing, and that if it becomes something that can be applied to other games, cool, whatever. But like, and this might come from like the board game side of things, right? Like where you're often striving for like innovation and like trying new. It's not necessarily brand new mechanics, but new combinations of like mechanics that specifically fit like that board game, right? Because you want to make that experience work as much as possible, rather than like a more like flexible system, right? So to me, I think the Aaron core, I guess, would be valuing specificity over flexibility, maybe. Yeah, I like things that are very specific to what they want to do. That might be it.
That's Aaron core, specificity over flexibility. I love that. And with that thought in our heads, I think this would be a great time for us to take a quick 5 to 10 minute break. Thank you all so much for being here and for hanging out with us. Aaron and I are gonna take a quick 5 to 10 minute break. We'll see you right back here, and we're gonna be talking about specters, the process, the inspiration, and then the rulebooks and the mechanics. And we will see you in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Make sure to get up, stretch, pet your pets, tell them Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. And we will be back, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. See you in a bit. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you took that time to get up, stretch, pet your pets, and tell them Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. Welcome back to Designer Spotlight. We're here with Aaron Lim, the creator of Spectres of Brocken, a mech game that is about the friends that you've met in school and now your enemies on the conflict. Surviving a conflict and war. It is about is a game about finding out who you are and what you have become. And with all of that, if you want to support Aaron, please go ahead and use !Aaron to go check out his social media stuff, and follow his work on Itch.io, and use !Spectres to go and check out the game on Itch.io as well. And with that, Aaron, you wanted to announce a little quick thingy as well too.
Oh yeah. Very, very quickly. So I mentioned this is not a game earlier in the stream. That was actually made by Nora Blake. I believe they no longer make games. They might have deleted a lot of their stuff already. And I'm like thinking, oh shit, should I have mentioned it? But like I already have, and I thought the very least I could do is like mention who made the game. Absolutely. Yeah, like I could not find it anymore online, so I'm pretty sure it's like gone. I don't know whether they just nuked their whole itch. Anyways, please want to mention.
Yes. Shout out to Nora Blake. Hope you're fine wherever you are. But cool. That's a really cool game concept when you mentioned it. It really speaks to the idea of like games as like creative mediums as well. And with that, speaking of games as creative mediums, we've got a we got a creative little game here too called Spectres of Broken, recently released by you. A mech game with a very, very specific premise, which makes a lot of sense because an Aaron core game is specificity over flexibility. Everything
Yeah, I
makes
guess so.
sense now. When you said that, I was like, ah, I see. Amazing. But it's a game specifically about making friends and then later on going to war with them in your massive giant mechs. So I wanted to ask you, what inspired this game, like specifically with this premise, with these mechanics?
Yeah. So the kind of like history behind the game is there was the emotional mech gem back in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of like one of the early big game jams on itch.io. That was
Mm-hmm.
around when Google Plus had just shut down or
Yes.
had announced they were shut down, and a lot of tabletop RPG designers were looking for a new place to go. It's like, look, itch has a lot of cool features. Why not let's try to put our games up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have been like 2018 that the conversation had already started and people had already been putting like tabletop games up on itch. But I think
Yes.
2019 was the big explosion because of the shutdown of like Google Plus, and also
Mm-hmm.
like people were just trying a lot more people like started getting into like making tabletop RPGs
Mm.
around then as well, I think. And this was like a big game jam that kind of like was like a locus of like interest.
Okay.
um I, yeah, so I think it was one of the first early big tabletop game jams. So shout out
Mm-hmm.
to John Harness, and I think Takuma Okada were the ones who organized the game
Mm-hmm.
jam on itch. So I wanted to make a game for that game jam, because I like mechs.
Yeah.
So hashtag sad mech jam back then. So the original version of Spectres was actually didn't have this premise at all of getting to know each other as
Mm.
like students, and then doing the time skip and like fighting in like giant mechs.
Yeah.
Spectres was originally just about like, hey, I really like the trope of like the mech design reflecting like the
Mm.
characteristics of like the character who's piloting them, right?
Ooh,
So like
yeah.
a impulsive hot-headed person would pilot a mech that has like um like impulsive hot-headed things that they can do, right? Like
Yes.
it reflects that. So the original version of Spectres didn't have that. It was just like, oh, you design the mech as you play. You
Mm.
reveal the characteristics of the mech as a way of revealing the characteristics of
Mm-hmm.
the character. And then as I was playtesting it, I realized that, oh, one of the problems that we had in the game is that like it's very hard for you to get a handle of your character, right?
Yeah.
Of who they were before you like start going into like the war and everything. So it's like,
Mm.
okay, I wanted to expand character creation,
Yeah.
and kind of like one of the ideas was just like playing through character creation, right?
Yes.
So you would slowly build up who your character was, and then later on show how that reflects in the custom mech that they pilot later on.
Yeah.
um and when I thought of that, I was like, oh shit, I should use this like time skip thing, right?
Mm.
And that came actually. So Fire Emblem Three Houses had not come out yet. So I want to be very clear. This is not related to Fire Emblem Three Houses, but it was very, very funny when like I saw Fire Emblem Three Houses, and like, oh shit, this is basically like what I wanted the game to do.
When you mentioned the game jam, I was like, that is before Three Houses came out. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think Three Houses had been announced, but I wasn't really paying attention to it at the time, so
Yeah.
I had not been aware. So I only played Three Houses in 2020, I think.
Mm.
So I hadn't. I think I knew that it was a Fire Emblem game. I did not know that it was like there was a time skip in it, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I might have known a little bit, but like I didn't really. So the inspiration behind this game is actually another manga
Mm.
called Break Blade or Broken Blade. I think it's localized as Broken Blade in some
Yes.
places. So Break Blade was actually the big inspiration behind it.
Okay.
Do you know the series at
I'm
all?
not familiar with Breakblade. No,
Yeah.
this is new for me.
So it is a mech series as well. That's why I like immediately made the connection,
Okay.
right? So in that story, the three main characters,
Mhm.
it was Regard. I forgot their names as well. There was 4 main characters actually. So there's the main character, the rival pilot, his the main character's love interest
Yeah.
who married the king of a country who is also his friend.
So
It's like a really messy relationship already, right? Yeah. And they studied in a school together, and then later on, like, one ended up being the prince and then becoming the king of a country, and the other guy, the rival, is from a different country, and then so they ended up having to fight each other, right? Literally that premise, right? So it was from Breakblade. So that was it. That was the main inspiration. And then as I continued to work on it, then I realized that, actually I do really love time skips. So an Altogether Different River also has the time skip element to it. It is a really potent like storytelling technique. I wouldn't call it like Aaron called. It just so happened that like these 2 games ended up having them. Like not all my games are time skip games, but it's I think it is like a very like potent, supercharged like time storytelling technique, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's so interesting, because and I guess now we can really get into the game mechanics and the elements of the game, because you've brought up a lot of very, very interesting elements there to like bite into. Folks, we will not be doing a deep dive on the rulebook today. We will be doing it in a future TTRPG learning spaces where I have more time to like get through the nitty gritty and things like that. But today we're more focused on the thematic elements, the game design elements, and really just spotlighting kind of like a lot of the very, very interesting aspects of this game with Aaron here. So just letting you all know, I will not be going through the entirety of 122 pages today. That will happen on another day. But I do want to talk about the idea of like the way that you've crafted a system that integrates the idea of a time skip and the idea of playing through character creation. And I think let's start with character creation. So in Spectres of Brocken, everybody, you start off, you get a pilot sheet, you fill out a lot of basic elements there, which is like your bonds, your traits, your anchors, things like that, things that have a narrative driven focus. One of the things I do wanted to point out though specifically is that when in character gen itself, when you have the sheet in front of you as a player, you choose a trait, and this trait is either a conviction, an impulse, a pride, or a flaw. So you choose one and you fill the rest out through gameplay. And I wanted to like tap into your thoughts behind that, sort of, Aaron, of like leaning into the idea of letting the players build consistently through a game, especially when you get through the academy phase. What's the thought behind it?
It came from a couple of different things. Like part of it was just reducing like the load, like the like slowly introducing like more and more pieces for you to like interact with. That is a very minor thing, because ultimately I realized that like actually there's a lot of rules load going in, even though you only choose one trait, right? There's a lot of like you have to learn all the moves and everything. So like that is a minor reason for doing that. One of the big reasons was thematic. Like we mentioned, we're talking about thematics. Is that like once I figured out that like I'm like I figured out the touchstone of like Breakblade as like the core thing is that like your character kind of like changes throughout like stories, right?
Yes.
Like you're never just one thing. So the idea that like if you're gonna start as like a young character, like a young teen pilot, and this was very influenced by Masks.
Yes.
Where your stats are not static, they change, right?
Yes.
Like your they're not called stats. I can't remember what they're called in Masks, but like those stats, the plus one and all, it shifts around because your preconception of who you are as a young person is constantly changing.
Yes.
So this was really heavily influenced by Masks and like seeing that they were able to do that mechanically, right? Which is something that I had also encountered like playing RPGs, is that like when you create a character, you have an idea of like who they are. You choose all your abilities and skills and like stats and all of that stuff. You have this preconception, and then you play, and then you realize like, oh, that's not who this character is.
Yes.
Right. Like you discover the character as you play the character.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And because of that, I wanted to be able to reflect that like play experience in the game, where it's like, look, just decide a few things about your character, right? And then the rest of it you can like change however you want as you play, as you discover who they are.
Yes.
Right. And even the one thing that you chose at the start of the game is like, you can change that, right? You can also just change your trait. So that was the main reason why I wanted, like, it's very, very slightly, it's like, oh, I didn't want you to like choose 4 things at once and like have to keep all these things in mind. And then the main thing was more the thematic of like pulling from masks and from like Breakblade itself, and like the way people play games. It's just like your characters are like mercurial anyways.
Yeah. That is so cool, because it's so nice to have like a mechanic for that does get rewarded of being able to like think about your character in a very, very deep and reflective way. And I think this mechanic 100% facilitates that. It's also wonderful for unhinged players like myself to immediately start with a flaw. This is my flaw. These are my L's. These are my L's. All of you who are at a table with me, do with that information what you will. Enjoy. Like that is so much fun to play with, and which is so interesting, because like in playing this game, right, the structure of this game is mainly you have 2 phases. You have the academic phase, and then you have the conflict phase. And you do in the book recommend that folks take a break in between those sessions. This isn't let's rush a one-shot sort of game. Like, this is 2 distinct sections of the experience of Spectres of Brocken. And being able to kind of it is a very, very interesting element in this game, because usually when RPGs are created, especially something similar in kind of like flavor to this sort of game, it's like, this is how you make a mini campaign. This is how you make a campaign. I wanted to ask you about the idea behind condensing an experience into just either a 2-session affair or a 1-session affair split into 2. How you came about it and why it's important to you in this particular game.
So I play a lot of one-shots, right? Partly because of like, I want to try a lot of different games, and like partly also is like it's easier to organize players for a one-shot than it is to like get an ongoing campaign, right? Like just practically. So originally the Spectres design was trying to fit everything into a one-shot, to like a 3-4 hour one-shot. And then I realized, like, as we continue playtesting and like developing, it's like, it's probably better to just split it into like 2 sessions. So in my mind, actually, by default, Spectres should be a 2-session game, right? And then, but you can, I've done it, I ran it at like Big Bad Con, and I've run it for like streams and stuff, where like you can fit enough of the game into like a single one-shot, right? And I know some people, like, I don't do this anymore, but like back then, like, you know, when I was job hunting, we used to play, you could play like 6-hour sessions, right? It's possible.
I remember those days.
I'm sure there are people in the world who can still do that. So it's like, you know, if you can do that, all power to you, but like, please take a break in between. So I kind of like left that mode of play in there because it is possible to do it. And it was originally designed to try and do that. It's just that I don't think I prefer, me personally, I prefer playing it in 2 sessions, right? Because even forgetting things about your character can be fun. Like because like, like if you misremember something that happened in the academy phase, and that becomes a thing, becomes a point of contention in the conflict phase, that can also be fun. That makes a lot of
sense, because you don't remember every single day of your college days, do you? Right? Like, you don't remember it fully. That makes a lot of thematic sense.
So that's why I put that recommendation. Like, even if you play like a I mean, you also just should take breaks anyways, but like
Yes.
specifically if there are two very distinct phases of the game, so just take a break in between them,
Mhm.
because you're basically gonna learn a new game in the second half anyways.
Yes, that
Right?
is.
Like the core mechanics are the same,
Mhm.
but there's enough new stuff in the second phase that you should allow for that time to like look.
Mhm.
Let's just make a clean break in between, and like allow that space to like
Yes.
learn and switch gears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, you misremembering and you forgetting things makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. If you're gonna enter in a conflict phase like years after what happened in Academy, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Thematically with
it's
stuff
a
like that.
bug, not a it's a feature, not a bug.
It's a feature, not a bug. I love that.
Yeah.
And on the topic of like taking a break and taking that rest period, throughout the book, there are consistent elements reminding folks about the importance of rest, about reflecting, about asking questions, and also about safety. You have a section in the book that talks about like safety tools and things like that.
Mhm.
And I have, I've interviewed Valis. Valis also has a section about safety tools in their game because specifically when you're talking about a game about missing memories and collaborative storytelling, you should you
Yeah.
should have lines and veils. But I wanted to hear like your perspective of Spectres of Brocken and the importance of introducing safety tools in the rulebook itself.
Yeah. I think it's a thing that just is generally useful for any game,
Mhm.
right? So my perspective on like safety tools is that they are tools
Mhm.
that ultimately point towards that like look, you should communicate with the players in the game.
Mhm.
I find them particularly useful for like especially for GMless games, right?
Mm.
Not to say that like you don't need safety tools in GM games, but like, I think in GMless games, um, there is a tendency for people who are not familiar with GMless games
Mm.
to uh, either play safe, where they're like,
Mm.
oh, try not to step on other people's toes, like
Yes,
creatively,
that's true. That's true.
or blunder through it and like kind of like become a GM. Especially for people who are used to GMing, suddenly playing GMless games, they might find themselves. I found myself doing this was like I
Mm.
tended to like take control of situations and
Yes.
because I'm used to as a GM, it's like, oh, I have like authorial control over this part of the game, right? And so I think safety is really like it's not just safety, but like calibration tools in terms of like, hey, it's you want to foster an environment where like, look, it's good and safe to be creative here, to put forward your ideas and like not worry about people trampling over them.
Yeah.
Or hey, if we are gonna play with like topics of e- in the game specifically, because there's topics of like conflict and war and um um like broken relationships, right? Like yeah, so that can be sensitive for some people, like so that is that's definitely a thing I thought about, but
Yeah.
like it's just generally like, look, even if you play in other games, it's like, look, you can be confident that whatever you put, everyone is excited for it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like I know that like we are not talking about like let's say we are not talking about parental abandonment today,
Yes.
right? Like in the game that we are playing, so we just put that as a line or as a veil. So
Yes.
I can be 100 confident, like whenever I talk about difficult relationships with parents, I know that there's a line that I can't cross. And so
Yes.
anything not anything, but like that I'm more confident in like bringing stuff that is not in that
Yes.
space, and like know that like we have all talked about this ahead of time,
Yeah.
and we are all like consenting to like play within that space.
Yeah.
And so I'm confident in my creativity there, to share my creativity with other people then.
Yeah.
And
And it makes sense in a game like this.
Yeah.
It 100%
Yeah.
makes sense in a game like this, because I was gonna get into this in the conflict phase, but we're already talking about it. But like, this is a game that has PvP built in, which is wild to me, because like a lot of RPGs, usually when you enter into the game, especially a multiplayer RPG, there's the framing of like you are a party, you are a group, you are solidified, but you play in a
Mhm.
lovely, like really delicious sort of like gray area here of like you start off that way, you are a group, you
Mhm.
have these distinctive unique relationships, but there will be like from the get-go there will be conflict, you will be set against each other in
Mhm.
again, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a toxic PvP sort of standpoint, but like it is
Yeah.
in essence a player versus player sort of conflict,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
which is all the more important to have these lines and veils safety tools kind of like brought up in a rulebook like this so that everyone is able to like, oh, these are conversations we should be having and ensuring that everyone feels
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
honestly, nothing is more fun than co-signing each other's doom with each other's consent. Because
Yeah.
you can say a wild out of pocket things to each other and go, "Oh, ow! Oh, are you okay? Yeah, no, keep going, keep hitting me. It's good."
Mhm.
And that's so awesome. Another cool thing that I liked in your rulebook, specifically, is the different rules format that you
Mhm.
have of having a learning format, which is this is the text of the game, you read the game, you learn how to play it, and then get into it. But also having a rule summary section. Thank you so much for doing all of us GMs a great service. Because the last thing I want to do as a GM is like flipping through the book to find
Yeah.
the specific thing. And I do wanted to highlight that. And yeah, was this something you always wanted to have in the rulebook, or was this something that came up in like playtesting or something like that?
Um, I think this is something that I've always wanted to do in rulebooks.
Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of board games. So this is a thing that I picked up from board games specifically.
Yeah.
And also like from like trading card games, right?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, I fucking learned like magic from the comprehensive rules.
Yes.
No one should do that. Like the comprehensive rules are there to be as in they're there as a reference, right?
Yes.
If there's a rules ambiguity or like a issue, like understanding the card, you can look to the comprehensive rules and that will tell you exactly how to resolve it. But that's not how you learn to play the game, right? You learn to play the game by with the learn to play documents, or like there's tutorials and
Yes.
stuff, and like people teaching you, right? So it's always been a tension in like tabletop RPG texts in that they have to be both. They have to be both a teaching document and a reference document.
Yes.
And often the reference document part of it is downplayed, right?
Yes.
A lot of times when people do a reference, they might do like 2 pages at most, right? Of just, okay, here's a quick summary of the rules. But like if you need the details, you still need to go back and look at the teaching document to like tell you where those rules are. So I don't know whether it's successful, like, but I'm trying, right? So I think it's we ended up at like 6 pages, right? Of like so I basically it just took that idea of like, look, it's very common to have a rule summary somewhere in the book that just summarizes it. I'm just expanding that to like be a bit more robust. Like I still have a lot of stuff in there. It's like, look, if you need the details, here's where in the book you can go find them, just so that I don't need to repeat basically tables, right? Like I don't need to repeat the tables again at the back.
Very nice.
But I wanted it to have a second version of like, look, if you just need it as a reference, just read this section, right? And the fun weird thing about like game design is that like when I was writing the original rules for Spectres, I was writing it in that format of the rules reference.
Oh,
Not because when I'm playtesting, I need the rules reference to know what rules I've decided on that day.
yeah.
But then when I teach the game, I'm usually orally teaching the game, right? So I wrote that part first and then wrote the teaching version of it. So it's like I already had that. Why not just put it in, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually a really handy way of like going about it from a game design perspective. Of like,
some people might find it not work for them, but like that's what worked for me, right? Like I like writing a rules reference first, and then like because then like it lets me be flexible how I teach the game. But there are people like I recently. Just yesterday playtested a game that like specifically by Carol Assertion, who's a great game designer, by the way. And they wrote one where like it's step by step tells you how to like learn and like create your characters and everything, and that's
Yes.
super helpful, right? When we are in the playtest stage, because that helps us learn the game quicker. And having that at an early stage is also a really good way to play to make and play test the game. It's just it just wasn't the way, and like I don't know whether I could do that. I might try it, like it might be fun to like try, but like my default kind of like my instinct is to like write rules references, and partly that comes from like board games, right?
Games.
Yeah.
That's the perfect segue to one of the elements that was very resonant to me when I was reading through the PDF and reading through the book was this feels like a board gamey TTRPG, and that's not like a value judgment or anything like that. It is actually a very interesting and really unique dynamic to have with a TTRPG. I played a lot of TTRPGs, especially being in the AP space. So coming into, and mostly online, right? Mostly online. So there's a lot of, as you said, rule books. It's rule books, PDF sheets, what have you. So coming into a game and like reading through it and going, oh, this feels like I can like visualize in my head, sat in front of like a really cozy table and playing this game, because there's a lot of like really board gaming elements and physical elements. Specifically, the thing I wanted to talk about today is the word bank, your word bank mechanic, which I think is really cool, because you have this element of like a shared space you can easily adapt it virtually, not saying that it has to be in person, but there's this idea of a shared physical space, whether virtually or IRL, that the players all share, that acts as not only a mood board, like thematic touchstones of the setting that you're in, but also a way to act as a player resource and moves. How did you come up with this word bank mechanic for this game?
Yeah. So the short answer for that is that when I realized I wanted, so the game used to be a lot more board gamey.
Okay.
Yeah. So it used to be a lot more board gamey in the sense that like the conflict phase was less focused on like the emotionality of the characters and more about, hey, who will actually win the war, right?
I see.
So there used to be an advantage marker that like denotes like, oh, which faction is currently winning the war, and then you can spend resources to try and pull the advantage marker to your side. All of that stuff was in like earlier versions of the game, right? And then so early on, I had not played like any like belonging outside belonging games yet. So the token stuff was like, I had token stuff in the game, but that came more from like the board game side of things. Of like, oh, how do you represent like who has advantages? How do you represent resources? You just use tokens. And the advantage marker and making tokens like a big part of like a game component actually came from another game that I referenced in the opening of the book, which was Melody Watson's On Mighty Wheels, which has like I think I played it at ArcanaCon in 2019, where I think she used like a book as like a token to like just pass around, right?
So cool.
And that was like a spotlighting mechanic of like, okay, who's currently in the spotlight? It's a very cool game, by the way. You are actually people putting on a folk play about a story of what happened during the revolution, during the October Revolution, I think, in Russia. So you're playing dual roles, right? Like you are acting out something that happened and also acting as the people who were in the thing that happened. Yeah, and so that dual layer of like abstraction and then with the token being the spotlight was like really cool. So that led me to like think more about using like not just using token mechanics as like board gamey like resources kind of thing, right? That they could be narrative tokens as well. So Spectres was originally more board gamey, and then as I like started playing around and like playing like I played Dream Askew, and what was the other? There was another. I played Dream Askew for sure. I can't remember. There was another BOB game that we played. I feel like there was one. Anyways, like like definitely Dream Askew was obviously a huge inspiration, and in that one you use tokens as the resources for like activating moves and stuff. And then because of the time skip mechanic,
Yes.
I realized that I wanted tokens that had memory.
Yeah.
Right. And originally, one of the ways I wanted to use it was to use cards, right?
Yes.
Like, so, if I use the three of hearts here, it will mean something, and then like if I use the three of hearts again, it could mean the same thing. And I realized just use words, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't need cards, right? So it was a pretty quick step from using cards to using words.
Yes.
And then I always thought that like at some point I will change the wording for word bank and words, because that was just the first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I realized that like actually I took a lot of it from Fate's aspects, which is why I also credit Fate in the book. And then later on, so even though I had kind of like the word system already, later on I also read another game by Adam Vest called Necronautilus that also uses words as a mechanic.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the genesis of the idea, but that gave me a lot of like confidence, and like also like helped me to think about like, hey, how should I be using words in the game?
Yeah.
And like how to present using words in the game, right? So like that was also kind of like important. So not I'm not trying to like downplay Necronautilus here. It just so happened like that, like I had already had that mechanic, but like Necronautilus was really important in like trying to figure out how to write and explain how words would work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's all where all of that came about. Like it's basically it's like it was very heavily token based for a very long time. I believe, like, I started making the version of this game in 2019. I think the token version stayed until 2021 even. Yeah. So like 2 years.
That is so interesting, because especially the idea, like marrying this back again to the resonant themes of this game, of memory, of connections, and what incites those like deep, whether buried or deeply hidden, resonant, whatever that manifests for your character, those feelings of nostalgia, what happened in the past, who you were, who you are now. Having a word bank, I think, and using words as a mechanic is so interesting to me. It's a mechanic that I personally have only recently seen. My first experience with it was with the Wild ttrpg that uses whispers as a way of being able to kind of like enforce something that happens within the game to your advantage, or a twist that you'd want to introduce into the world. And having something like that with the word bank is really, really cool. And it's so interesting to hear that like it used to be more board gamey, but still retaining that like very, very delicious flavor, but making it kind of like less token, more deeply resonant with the thing. I think the idea of like words is very, very good for the theme of this game. I guess with that, let's talk about the phases then. Let's talk about the phases of the game. So there's two main phases. There's the academy phase, and there's the conflict phase. And in the academy phase, you are young pilots learning how to you're learning, you're studying, you're in college, you're figuring out who you are. And before you get fully in the playing of the game, you have a little section in the rulebook about world tendencies. Great heading, by the way. Love that. Love the idea of world tendencies, of like settings, basically, of general vibes for what players are about to enter into. And I wanted to hear like that's actually a really, really clever idea to put into a game to help contextualize a lot of the like not necessarily like foreshadowing, but kind of flavoring the path that these young players are already on. What inspired the world tendencies?
I mean, they're basically play sets, right? Like different play sets for the game. I just like the word, the phrase "world tendency."
So good.
That comes from Dark Souls, actually.
Oh, does it? Oh,
yes,
I haven't
I
played
stole
a Dark Soul.
Yeah. I stole a Dark Souls thing, and that means a completely different thing in Dark Souls.
Yeah.
But I always thought it was a very fun way to describe what a playset is,
It's
because
really good.
because they're not. So the way a lot of tabletop RPGs, story games use playsets is that like you can always customize a lot of things, right?
Yes.
And there's pick lists and stuff. So even though it's a play set, it's not a set place, right?
Yes.
It's
yes.
not a completely like
It's
this
not
is
an
the setting
adventure
you have to
module
do.
where you have like
Yeah, this is
set
exactly what you
things.
need to do.
Yeah.
So that they have always been like, you can adjust stuff anyways. So it's like, it's more of a tendency towards that sort of thing rather than that thing, right? And weirdly enough, the world tendencies are a lot more strict.
Yeah.
Because I ended up, I was like, shit, I actually do just need to do. I think it's actually just helpful to write out like factions and stuff, rather than like pick lists. Because one thing I realized like as I playtested the game is that like, I'm a mecha sicko. A lot of my friends are like mecha sickos, but like not everyone is, right?
Yes.
But the people that aren't mecha sickos still really had fun and like could engage with the game, but they didn't have the confidence to like play around with like the tropes of like mecha stories.
Yeah, the understanding of the genre that they're in.
Yeah. So it's just like, look, I'm gonna put a lot more concrete stuff for those people to play with. And then if you're like a sicko already, then like, look, you can like change. You're gonna change stuff anyways, or whatever. Y'all go off and do your own thing. This is not for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is kind of like why I ended up like with like world tendencies as like a phrase, and also just like realizing that like I do need to like give a little bit more help to people who like because the thing is, it's a mecha game, but it's also not. It's not really important. To me, it's really important that the mechs are there, right?
Yes.
But even if you have not like watched any like mech shows, like the character drama is something that you can engage with.
Yes.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that people who wanted to play that kind of like character drama game were supported to be able to play the game, even if they might not be familiar with the genre.
Yeah. That's actually it reminds me of something that I picked out while reading the book of the section of what even is a mech, right? And you had a line in there where you said something along the lines of, we pilot metaphorical mechs all the time, which is which is a very, very interesting framing of this game. Like, yes, it's a mech game, but the mechs only really come in the conflict phase. And honestly, if I were to adapt this, I could very easily adapt out the mechs in there. I do want to hear. I want to hear more about this metaphorical mechs that we pilot every day in your mind.
Yeah. I mean, this comes back to like why I find like mech shows interesting, right? Because like mechs in fiction are often used as like stand-ins for like certain things.
Yes.
Like most of the time it's about like the impersonal and the dehumanization of like people in war, right?
Yeah.
In classic like back show Gundam.
Yeah.
In the original Gundam, like people don't see Amuro as like a person, they see him as the pilot of the Gundam, right? And that kind of like shrouds him and like turns him into something else. So like the mech becomes a symbol of like the dehumanization of like the people who fight in the war, and like the industrialization of like warfare, right? So to me it's really important to like the themes of the game of like how in you are full human people, right? You see your history, you see like the things that you went through as like children or as like teenagers, as young people. So you're full people. You realize that you're full people, but then when you're in a mech, you're that kind of like hides it, right? And that's also a thing that we do to each other, even without a giant metal suit of armor
Mm.
like covering you, right?
Yes.
Like we mentioned like we want to free Palestine earlier,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And like a huge part of like the thing that enables like genocide is like not seeing other people as people.
Yes.
Yep. And so like if you see that person as a combatant, as a soldier, as
Mm.
a person piloting a mech, then they are less of a person and easy to kill,
Mm.
right? That's part
Yes.
of the thing about like mech fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Like in like I think it was Zeta. It's like Camille realizes that, oh, I'm fucking killing people, right?
Yeah.
Or I think Amuro does it in like Gundam as well. It's like, oh, there are people inside there and I'm killing people, right? I'm not just
Yes.
like blowing up another mech, right? And that layer of abstraction is there all the time, and it doesn't it is externalized as like this massive like hulking metaphor here.
Yeah.
But like it's a thing that we do all the time.
Yes.
Of like using technology to kind of like put distance between ourselves to like reach further than we could reach, but also kind of like
like depersonalize aspects
yeah
around us. Yeah, absolutely.
right. I think one of the examples that I use there is like a corporation is a mech,
Yes,
right?
you did.
Because like that's the thing that like pisses me off, and like people arguing that like, oh yeah, corporations should be treated like people too. Like fuck no. Like corporations aren't people. People are people, right?
People are
Like, and
people.
you are like piloting a corporation as if it's a mech. It's a thing to like protect you from failure. It's a thing that protects you from criticism.
Yeah.
It's a thing that protects you from responsibility to people.
Yes.
Right? The corporation did it. The company fired me, not you, person who's my manager.
Yes.
Right? Oh, the numbers told me that I should fucking fire you. Not me deciding that you are not needed.
Yes.
That your personhood is not counted in like those ones and zeros there, right?
Yeah.
So when I say that like we pilot metaphorical mechs all the time, that's why like I'm interested in like mech fiction, because like they tend to try to like address what mechs stand in for.
Yes.
Yeah, it's war, but it's also like capitalism. It's also like depersonalization at scale, like violence at scale, that like reduces people to like less than people, right?
No, that is so good. That's so cool.
And that is a frustrating thing to contend with. Not frustrating, but like it's a shameful thing to contend with, because like it's very difficult for me to like talk about this game now, like in the current situation, right? Like I'm glad like I had this time to like talk about it with you, but like releasing the game when I released it, and it's like, fuck man, like who am I to talk about like mechs and war fiction now? Like we are like relatively safe here in Malaysia, even though there's a lot of bullshit happening. But like, you know, like we are seeing like a genocidal war like in our lifetime, and like people are not doing anything about it, and like they're hiding behind the structure of like government of like the machinery of like nation states and like governments, and like yeah, it fucking sucks. And like I don't it's very hard to like talk about it without wanting to like burn something.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand. Above table checking, how are you feeling? Safety tools exist in real life. How are you feeling, buddy?
Yeah, sorry.
No. Don't be sorry. Check. I as the facilitator of this, I'm just checking in, making sure how you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to the audience, because like I was springing on them, right? Like, but like that is like a thing to contend with when like you make a fiction that like contends with those things, right? Yeah, so I'm feeling okay. I've made my piece that like, look, I'm making the thing, right? I made the thing, right? And what I can do right now is like to speak out against the things that this game should be criticizing, right? And I hope criticizes, right? Like the costs and like the inhumanity of like war. So it's like that's what I want to kind of like like mentioned in
Yeah.
like in the context of like the game as
Yes.
well. I also would highly recommend like looking out for it's not done yet, but like someone who I greatly respect in terms of like what they're trying to do with like games about war is Tan Chao Han from like Singapore, who's like working on a game called Dacia that is about like unlikely heroes and like unsung heroes of like wartime, right? Like the gangsters and the hucksters that help people survive through a war, right?
Yes.
During the Japanese occupation of like Singapore, which we in Malaysia also like
Yeah.
like our living grandparents lived through.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That I remember the Sejarah, yeah, like that that's really cool. I'm gonna keep an eye out on that, and I might reach out to them and be like, hey, wanna talk
Yeah,
about
Shahan
it?
is great.
Yeah, wanna talk about that? Because that sounds great. Amazing. I think that commentary that you did and like the timing that you released and everything, like this perspective is still very, very valuable, and it's still important to us as marginalized creators to continuously critique and speak out about it and make our voices heard. And yeah, fuck genocide.
I mean,
stop the genocide in
yeah.
Palestine. Free Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be very honest about it, right? Like when
Yeah.
I made it, I wasn't really thinking about like
Yeah.
like actual war happening in other, even though we are living in a world that is all constantly at war.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, like Congo and Sudan as well. It's
Yeah.
like stuff that is not talked about as much,
Absolutely.
right? Because it's like easy to put those things out of mind,
Mhm.
right? So I cop to that. Like I'm like engaging with like mech fiction and war fiction in a way like that is dispassionate. Not say dispassionate, but like I'm not like as invested in it as like we probably should be,
Yeah.
because these things are still happening.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And
not to say that we can't engage with that, but like just acknowledging like the time that we are in.
Yeah, no, and it is important to do so. I think to continuously critique, acknowledge, reflect on our role and especially as creators and things like that. So your perspective is very, very valued here. On to like the game and like the two different phases. The academic phase is the phase of discovery, and we have that, as we've already talked about before. A pilot know thyself, like choose a trait, and then you're gonna fill in the rest during the academy phase. There's a lot of aspects to the academy phase. We're not gonna talk about all of them, but I do want to talk about specifically the idea of setting up scenes and the using of reveals and pivots alongside your player moves. So player moves are fueled by words. You either gain a word or lose a word in the different moves that you've made. And one of the things I really liked about the questions, reveals, and pivots that you have in the in this section is that they all very, very interestingly they, regardless of which one that you have, they're stirring up a little bit of mess. They're stirring up a little bit of drama and tension, which is a lot of fun to play into as a player. And I think for players who might not necessarily instinctually lean into the drama, it sets the tone from the get-go, which I really, really love. I like the way that you laid out this. And yeah, like in that section, you're like, hey, if there are any doubts on what you should be doing in these scenes, go for your reveals and your pivots. Like go into that element of drama. And I wanted to like hear from your perspective as a game designer in trying to create in the text itself sections that empower players to take the messy route, take the messy choice in the way that they play.
Yeah, I think in a very similar way to how the world tendencies were there to like be scaffolding for people who are not familiar with mech fiction. The reveals and pivots are also there for the same reason. I realized when I played the game is that like I having like engaged with like not just mecha fiction but like anime style storytelling where like everything is like super messy and well, it's not just anime but like a lot of like this, like I love musicals as well, right? And musicals also have this thing, it's like, oh, you just have to sing your feelings out, right? Just be super obvious about it and don't worry about like subtlety can come from other places, not from your mouth. not from your singing voice. So I realized that like some players struggle with that. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do, or like I'm not sure,
Mm.
and like especially with like if you're playing this in like a GM-less mode.
Yeah.
This is why I also suggest like, if you're playing it for your first time, try and just play with a facilitator who's
Yeah.
like able to like help you out with all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to play the role of facilitator here. It's like, look, here are some ideas, right? Here are
Yeah.
the kind of things that happens in like genre fiction, that happens in not just mecha genre, but like teenage drama genres as well.
Mhm.
This is the kind of like things that happen in like coming of age dramas, for
Yeah.
example. So I just wanted to make sure like that kind of scaffolding was available.
Yeah.
But also optional, because like for experienced players, then like so this is one of the pieces of the game where I think it's kind of optional in the sense that like if you are an experienced player, you probably don't need this.
Okay.
Right? Like if you're used to like playing like story games and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you can kind of like just ignore this section, because like you already know how to like go for the heart,
Yeah.
right?
Go look at your
So
friends in
you
the
don't
eye,
need my
go for the jugular. Yeah.
yeah. You don't need my help to do that.
Yeah.
But it can be helpful to still read through the section to like, okay, this is what the bounds of what the story is like,
Yes.
right? But I don't need to specifically look for inspiration during play to like, I need to look up this specific reveal or use this specific pivot, right? So it's there more as scaffolding than as a mechanical thing,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, so I wanted it there, and like one of the big things that helped me like realize this was actually replaying Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands by Vincent and McGay Baker, which is one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
And also a mech game, and also like focused on relationships between people rather than the mechs themselves. And it's a huge like influence on like having the confidence to make a game like this, right? Like where you focus, like there's people who want to play like the messy relationships even if they don't like know the mecha genre trappings, right?
Absolutely.
So the way that game scaffolds things and like provides like messy ways to like entangle people was a big inspiration for like how I ended up doing the reveals and pivots in the game. Yeah.
You talking through that, I just kept thinking like, oh, this would be fun as an AP. This would be really fun as an AP. I know several people who are love mecha genre with their whole beings that would eat this shit up. But yeah, so rounding out the academy phase, like here, like this is how I say the questions, reveals, and pivots. Folks who are at home, you play through 2 to 3 scenes with each other with all these different elements, kind of like revealing a lot of the trappings that make all of you who you are, and kind of setting up of who you might become. We end this section with the ending of the academy phase with very violent questions. Like I brought this up with Valis when they were writing Starlight, and I'm just like, wow, Aaron, you wrote some really violent questions here to close out the academy phase and set up what's happening in the conflict phase. I'm gonna read a couple of them out just so that folks get an idea of how incredible these are. Simmering tensions have finally come to a head, and fighting spills over into the academy, causing you to shut down and scatter your pilots. How are your pilots drawn into the violence? Already setting the tone, already setting the expectation of here is where we're about to enter into the conflict of these of what's about to happen. And then the second question of you discover that the academy is deeply involved in the machinations of factions pushing out for all-out war. Who forsakes the academy and who decides to say? Like, even reading it, goosebumps up my arm. I'm like, oh, this is so deeply cool and also deeply violent questions. Are these questions inspired by specific scenarios in the mecha genre? Or were these kind of like, this sounds messy as hell and I decided to write it because I wanted to create problems? What was the vibe here?
I mean, it's basically just drawing from like the history of like mecha genre, right?
Okay.
Like the first one where like fighting spills over is like a very common like Gundam opening where like you have like you have your normal life and then suddenly fighting breaks out,
I
right?
see. Okay.
The one about like the academy being deeply implicated, that's less mecha and more like shonen school
Oh
stories
yeah,
where like
that's
you
true.
realize
That's
yeah,
true.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh wait, yeah, that is very shonen. Like
Yeah,
the
it's like,
thing
oh,
that
like,
builds you is the thing that like secretly has their own like machinations. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that I can't remember a specific mech show that has that, but like it's definitely all around in like
It's like
other
in
like shonen
Naruto. Like
stories.
Naruto
Yeah,
has
yeah, yeah.
that.
I quote Naruto as an influence as well, right? Like yeah,
Yes.
you yeah, it's a pretty common trope to like have that. So it's just, like, I was just trying to figure out like different ways for like um different relationships that you might have with the conflict,
Yeah.
right?
Which is
Yeah, and
all really cool. And I think you did a really good job here in like engaging with different things, because you have one of them that talks about like, oh, violence has started, but you have one that's like a little bit more like a simmering sort of thing, which might help players that want a more simmer. But you also have one that's like, nothing happens while you're at the academy, but
Yeah.
something will happen. And
Yeah.
you still make it really sad by saying, what was the last time you all managed to see each other before the war began? Which kind of flavors a lot of the stuff that can happen in the conflict phase, which is a great time for us to segue to the conflict phase. You have done something very interesting in the conflict phase of introducing a brand new mechanic, blood.
Yeah.
And blood, for the folks at home, is a mechanic that specifically quantifies the amount of blood on your hands. Specifically, it talks about the cost. It doesn't necessarily mean like literal blood, but it means the cost of war and the cost of conflict. That's a brave thing to do, is to like, all right, you played a whole game by this point. Here's a new mechanic. What was the thought behind introducing a whole ass mechanic in the second phase of play?
So it's actually more a thing of removing a mechanic, right? So I mentioned that like Spectres started off not having the academy phase.
Yes.
Right. So it's more about like, so I already had a design for the conflict phase, which previously was like very board gaming about who wins the war, and then obviously that doesn't make sense to have in the academy phase, so I just took that out.
Yes. Okay.
So that was how it started off.
Yeah. Okay.
So thematically, it also makes sense in that like you want to have a very clear distinction between, the salad days of your youth and then like the horrors of war, right?
Yes.
So it needed something to like show that like, look, there are stakes now, right?
Yes.
Doesn't mean that people don't get hurt in the academy phase, but like you don't have a mech. You you punch someone, they might, lose some teeth. You might break someone's arm, but you're not going to kill 30 people.
Yes.
By falling in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things that is the metaphor of mechs, is that like about like outsize impact, right? Like you fuck up when you are a person, you hurt one person, you hurt another person, you hurt 5 people maybe.
Yeah.
You fuck up in a mech, you fuck up in government, you fuck up as the head of like a company,
yeah,
right? You will kill 30.6 people.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that like that change in scale was clear, right? And so I wanted a new mechanic in there. To work. And because like previously it was a lot more like board gamey, positional, like who's winning. So when I transitioned away from that, I wanted a mechanic. I realized that like, it shouldn't be focused on like who wins the war, but like what cost would you be willing to win the war, right? And so that's why I transitioned from like advantage tokens and all that kind of stuff to blood. And talking about like, look, it's not a war isn't something to aspire to. It's not a glorious thing. It is a messy, a shitty, dangerous thing, right? Like one of the big touchstones for me was Gundam F91. There's a scene in it where, and I was very very taken that in updating, there's a new edition of Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands that's being worked on. And I saw a preview of like one of the new, as in it, the bakers released a preview. I didn't like see it. They released a preview of like
you snuck in like a rogue.
Yeah. So they released the preview of the of like a new a mini game in there that also draws inspiration from the same scene, where there's the Federation forces are fighting inside the colony, and there's a mech who's like firing at another mech. They're not trying to kill civilians. They're literally supposed to be trying to protect the civilians and like fight against the invading force. But one of the bullet casings, because the bullet casings are huge, right?
It's gonna be like
a mech.
The bullet casings are like the size of a house, probably.
It's not a house, but like a size of a bag, right? Like a luggage piece, like falls out of the mech and like hits someone and kills them.
Ouch.
And like that is just, I didn't intend to kill that person. I wasn't even looking at them.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't point anything at them.
Yeah.
But a bullet casing that fell off my gun killed someone.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what happens when you're in a mech. And so I wanted that kind of to show the cost isn't so easy as like, oh, do I kick the dog or like save the cat, right? No, it's not as simple as that. It's like, even if you are doing something like heroic, you will hurt people.
Yeah. There's still a cost, and that really resonates, and that's one of the cool things about that mechanic is like it should immediately from the get-go you're like, yes, this isn't a game about who necessarily wins the most, it's how much you lose, right? How much are you going to lose in the pursuit of the ending of this conflict, whether that's because again winning is subjective, right, in that in that specific scenario. Another aspect of the conflict phase is the idea of conflicts and messy reunions. We already talked at length about the mech anonymity and the wider sense of what that is. I just wanted to mention it again because I think it's cool as fuck for everyone to reunite as players and have this moment where you go, who's in that mech? And you describe that mech and then you coming out of it, or however that scene manifests, to realize who it is at the end of all of it. And also the idea of the concept of, again, we already talked about this, but the concept of PvP in a game is, because usually PvP is a thing that like, oh, this is just something like players are leaning to. I personally have rarely seen it like, hi, this is PvP, buckle in buckos, like let's get into it. And this game does that really, really well by having you all, as you enter the conflict phase, choose a faction. And you have to be on opposing sides. Like that's part of the drama of it all. And I think that's a really, really cool choice to have as a game designer in that. When you were designing it, did you ever go like, damn, I wonder how this is gonna play out, or did you just like lean into like the conflict and the chaos of it? Was there any like, oh, this is scary PvP. Well, is this too scary? In this.
No, I think it was like messy from the start, and that was from like Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands. Like I said, it's one of my favorite games. And that is a game that is about like messy conflict and like, you know, being on opposing sides. So like, yeah, I very, very much wanted that as a key feature of the game from the start. Because like my favorite thing from like mech fiction, not just mech fiction, but like, you know, a lot of like shonen fiction is like, we could have been friends, but like because of like the circumstances of where we find ourselves in, or because we have very opposing beliefs, we can't. We have to fight, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it's like, oh, we actually believe the same thing, but because of like family, or like I was just born in the wrong place, we have to fight, right?
Yeah.
Like I think conflict is interesting, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm similar, but I always have to ask because I'm just like, because not everyone necessarily sees conflict that way, and being able to, like, as a designer, be like, no, we're leaning into it is a very, very strong
Yeah, yeah,
choice.
yeah. Like the game allows you to be messy with each other,
Yeah, exactly.
right? It's not you instigating the conflict. It's the game. The game
The
is
game
making you
does,
do it. Don't
yeah.
worry about it. Yeah, yeah,
Don't
yeah.
worry about it. Have fun. Have fun. Reflect.
Yeah.
Have a an interesting kind of like moment here. Uh, in highlighting blood again as a new mechanic, folks, when I mentioned earlier that the player moves in the academic phase are flavored by whether you gain or lose a word. Now we have aspects of gaining blood, risking blood, which
Mhm,
is very, very cool. It is metal as fuck. And leading into that kind of like mechanic of blood, the epilogue, which is the section that comes at the end of the game,
mhm,
is when you go. Each player talks about you all work together to create an epilogue scene, and in this moment of closing things out, you go by who has the highest amount of blood, which I
mhm.
think is so interesting by having someone who's had the most cost in whatever they're doing set the scene and set the tone for everyone else. I think is very, very interesting. Uh, was was that was that basically the theme that you were going for, of having the person who had the most blood on their hands
Yeah.
set the tone for it?
The epilogue has gone through a few different iterations. It used to be a whole brand new phase.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so this game used to have three phases.
Mm-hmm.
Or not used to, but like there was a version of this game that had three phases, right?
Yes.
So it would have been the academy phase, the conflict phase, and the coda phase.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also think like post-war is like really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so that used to be a whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then realized that I gotta cut it. I gotta cut it down.
Yes.
Into the epilogue phase, and then the epilogue used to be, um, it used to be different as well. It didn't used to have all these specific questions. It was
Yeah.
just that like people would talk about. I think it was like everyone gets to say something that they changed in the world, and then the person with the most blood on their hands tells you how the world got worse than what
Mm.
you even thought, and then the person with least blood on their hands would tell you like, oh, look, this is like a moment of grace, right? Like this is how it's
Mm.
not as bad. um so that's when I started like using most blood and least blood as like a way to like figure out what other people would do.
Yeah.
And I kept that in because like it was just a useful thing, and also just as a reminder, like a useful reminder, like look at how much blood you have
Yeah.
on your hands, and like think about that. um uh because like that will definitely color like how you
Mm.
approach the epilogue, right?
Yeah.
So it made sense, like it still made sense to keep that as a way to keep track of things,
Mm.
for the new way of doing the epilogue, which is with just questions. Yeah.
Which is really, really cool. I
Mhm,
do want to as we're wrapping up, I do want to talk about the end of the epilogue section where you talk about,
mhm,
so basically how this runs, folks, is that each player goes until they answer at least one question. You continue exploring and answer any further questions, and you say goodbye to your players and to your pilots in your games. Um, and there's a very specific call to action that you have here that I really like, which is leaving some questions unanswered and sitting with the uncertainty of what you fought to make together, which
mhm,
is, I think, very, very nice. It's an element of storytelling that I think I'm seeing less and less of,
mhm,
especially specifically in like visual media, like movies and films, right? Where there's always this sort of pressure to have exposition and explain everything.
mhm,
When it's okay to have mystery and it's okay to sit with uncertainty, show us, don't tell us, sort of element, right?
mhm.
And I think that's a very, very nice element. And I would like to hear your thoughts about
Yeah.
it, about sitting in uncertainty at the end of a game. Because usually in D&D,
Yeah.
it's like, hi, here's the epilogue. Tell us what you do from 10 years to 50 years from now. How does your, there's that kind of like
Yeah.
typical standards. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I plagiarized myself here. In that, like, I did the exact same thing in an altogether different river, where like I also encourage you not to answer all the questions and like leave some things unsaid and uncertain. That's also just like that's just me. That's my personal taste in like I love ambiguous and not unambiguous. I love ambiguous endings where like things are left unclear and like it's always really fun to like finish watching a movie and then like with your friends like talk about like, oh, what do you think that meant, and like every time like another question from an uncertain ending gets answered, like it kind of like diminishes to me like the
impact.
the impact of it. So that's number one. That's just like a thing that I love, right? Maybe that's Aaron Core. Like it's just like
I know that
you
this
know, if
interview
you
is going. Let's discover what's Aaron Core together.
But like I do love that in like fiction, and also I guess specifically for the mecha fiction thing, one of my favorite transitions is between Mobile Suit Gundam and and Zeta Gundam. Where if you're not aware, like in the original Mobile Suit Gundam, it's very clear the Federation are the good guys, quote unquote. There are assholes in the Federation. There are people who will like suck in the Federation, but they're generally portrayed as like, oh, they're good guys, and like Zeon are worse, right?
Okay.
And then in the sequel, Federation are fucking fascists. Which is clear, like, and then they realize like, yeah, the Federation have been fascist the whole time, right? Like you've just been like choosing which side of which style of fascist,
which flavor of fascism
you're
enjoying.
So that transition to like, oh, the so and because it's a sequel, like the people who then you realize like, ah shit, like because like Amuro and Gang and Bright like helped to the Federation win the war, that planted the seeds for like the Titans to grow, right? And become like this like super fascist army. And so like I love that transition of like, look, you think you did the right thing, and you saved your friends, right? Like and the Zeon faction were fascist too, but you know, it was not an unambiguous good that you did, right?
Yes.
So I think to me, like in mecha fiction, that is like a very key part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool, and I love that. And with that, as we are wrapping things up, folks, we've just opened up our Q&A. So please drop any of your questions in chat. We're probably not going to keep the Q&A open for too long because we've already went over as it is. But I had enjoyed every moment.
Sorry.
And no, do not apologize. I love talking with you. This has been so much fun. But in the meantime, Aaron, while folks are potentially typing out their questions, I would love to ask you about if you have any tips or tricks or like advice you'd like to give to blooming game designers who haven't game designed yet, folks that have an idea they want to make to life. If you'd have any advice for them or things you wish you told yourself when you first started.
I think we talked a lot about this stuff early on. It's just like, look, playtest early, playtest often. Playtesting is fun, and like try and keep like your well-being and like your like passion and creativity like well fed and watered as well, in addition to just making good games. Because I think the ultimate thing I also come back to, and I tell my students often, is that like be a fan, like it's like trust your future self to be better than who you are today. Right? If you're a game designer, you will make games in the future, and they will be better games than the game that you made today. Right? You have to make the game that you're making now to get there. But trust yourself that like in the future you will make like better games, right? So even if this one sucks or is mid, on to the next one. You will make a better one tomorrow. You know? Like trust yourself there. I was almost gonna say like be a fan of your future self, right?
That's really sweet. No, I love that. Be a fan of your future self. No, that's really
like good. It doesn't have to all like it's a good motivator like to like keep going. But like you don't have to put everything into whatever you're working on currently, right? Because tomorrow you'll make another one.
That's true.
Yeah. So you save your energy for that, save your learnings for that. You'll make a better game tomorrow.
I love that. It seems that folks don't have any burning questions at the moment. But so and in respect for your time and everything, I believe it's time to wrap up.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, Aaron, where can we find you? Tell us about your upcoming projects. Hype
Yeah.
yourself up. Let me know.
Yeah, so you can find all the stuff that I do on itch.io. So aaronlime.itch.io, spelled EHRONLIME. That's also where the handle you can find me on most social media. I'm still on fucking Twitter. I was trying to use Blue Sky a lot more. I fell off a little bit after holidays. And I'm trying to get back into co-host as well. I really like writing like longer stuff. On co-host earlier in the year. I want to try and do that a little bit more. Yeah, but other than that, like look out for that. I'm in the process. So Suspectus is not done. So the digital version is out. You can get that on my itch page. But I'm in the process of doing proofing and printing for like the physical version to fulfill the Kickstarter, right? Looking at like timelines and stuff, like it's probably not going to be available until like January at the earliest.
Okay.
Possibly February, depending on like shipping and stuff. But like definitely early next year, the physical version should be available. I am hoping to have it available through Indie Press Revolution, where currently you can also get physical copies of An Altogether Different River. I just mailed them more copies. So I think there might not be a lot left on their web store, but they should be getting a restock soon, depending on shipping again. And also just look out for on social media. I'll be blasting this out soon as well. We are doing Showcase Zero, Playtest Zero's showcase for the year, and also we will be we run Playtest Zero every other week. So every other Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Southeast Asia time, like GMT +8, and on Thursdays at I think it's 6 p.m. Sorry, yeah, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Is what it translates to. We only have one more session for Playtest Zero left in the year, and that is in 2 weeks on the 21st and 19th. I think 19th and 21st. Let me double check. Yes, 19th and 21st is our last Playtest Zero for the year, and our last session is a good one to come and join because you're not allowed to playtest stuff. That's just like a social kind of like get to know each other and like hang out and like maybe reflect on the year that's passed. So if you are nervous about bringing a thing to playtest and you just want to check out the vibes of the people there, that's a good one to like just come and like meet people. We try to be as inclusive as possible, and we don't put the link up in public just because we just make sure that we don't get like spam bots and stuff, and also because like not without getting into the history of it, like we are hermit crabbing our way into like the old Session Zero online server. So if you want to like take part in Playtest Zero, you're very welcome to just message myself or Thomas Manuel, who's I think at Chai by Post on Twitter, and either one of us, and we'll sort out a Discord invite for you. Yeah,
that is awesome.
Yeah, that's all.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. And I'll also introduce myself. Hello, everyone. For those of you who are new here, I'm Valiant Dorian. I use him, his pronouns. You can find me all on the internet at Valiant Dorian or at Otso SpiritBear. Please ensure that love each other I just set you on. And in terms of stuff for me, Transparent RPG is currently on our winter break. We do have our interlude episode coming in next week, week after next, soon. But this is a great time as we've just wrapped up Aquarn for you to go and check out and catch up on all of our episodes before Arc 2 premieres on January 6th, 2024. Please go and check that out. And this was the TTRPG Designer Spotlight. If you are a game designer and you would like to be featured in upcoming Designer Spotlight, please use !Spotlight to get the Google form for you to fill out, and fill that out. I'll be in contact with you ASAP. It is the holidays, so it's a little hard to schedule stuff in the moment, but this is a great time for me to announce that the next guest that we'll be showcasing for Designer Spotlight is the wonderful Taylor Navarro, writer of many, many, many things. We'll be exploring her wonderful Game Family album here together, and I'm so excited to do it. And we also do have Logan at Ink and Stories coming up immediately after her. We've got a wonderful star-studded guest list coming up, and I would love to see your names on it. And with that, as we wrap things up, thank you again so much, Aaron, for joining us for Designer Spotlight.
Welcome.
Yeah. Do not touch that dial, though, folks. We will be raiding the amazing folks over at Stella Luna for the premiere of Beyond the Brook. Let's go and send them all of our SpiritBear love. I have to type their username because they're not showing up for me for some reason. Are they not taking raids right now? That's odd. That is odd. Well, I sort that out and let Aaron go. Thank you all so much for being here. Please stay tuned for the raid, and we will be back soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.